Hello there friends and welcome. For today's BG3 guide we have a very fun and quite unique build. An Immortal 0 damage taken tank. Unlike my previous tank builds which focused into AC or attack debuffs, this time we'll be going all out into not only damage resistance but also stacked damage reduction on top, to the point your tank will be easily able to absorb almost if not all damage. That's right, 0 damage taken from all physical attacks, melee or ranged. Which becomes even absurd, if not very amusing, as enemies will just start passing their turns again and again and again, because they know they cannot penetrate your enormous defenses at all. Just look at that, it's hilarious. What other build in the game can you say will make enemies just pass their turn because they know how futile it is to try and attack you? And of course, by virtue of being a full fighter, you'll still be quite competent when it comes to dealing damage yourself, with more than even 13 entire attacks per turn. Lastly, the best part about this build is how early you can get your full damage resistance and reduction combo going, as early as Act 1. Which means this character is quite powerful when it comes to soloing the game as well. So without further ado, let us get into our Immortal 0 damage taken tank/DPS build, first with character creation. When it comes to race, amusingly enough, Gnomes can make very powerful tanks because they have advantage on all of the important mental saving throws, which means they have an easy time avoiding crowd control spell effects. This way your character won't just absorb most damage, if not all of it, but also be virtually immune to crowd control. However, as always, it doesn't matter that much because we'll have high enough initiative to alpha strike enemies and deal with problematic targets first, like enemy casters that tend to have low hit points. And even if you don't want to play a shorty gnome, you can always change your appearance to something else, while retaining the race benefits. As far as the lack of movement speed, there's lots of ways of enhancing it, but of course you can as always go with Wood Elf or Wood Half Elf for higher movement, even Half Orc for higher critical damage, because this build will get loads and loads of attacks as well. As far as class, Fighter is my preferred pick because we get to combine a lot of nice bonuses, especially when we get our subclass. But you can also start as a Paladin instead, ideally any class that grants you heavy armor proficiency at the start. Paladin is better if you want to multiclass your character into a Cleric later to continue spell progression and achieve smites. Otherwise, Fighter will provide you with an amazing number of attacks per turn. Because I already have 2 Cleric tank builds, this time I'll be going all out into Fighter. For the fighting style, pick either defense for an extra +1 to AC, or you might as well go with Great Weapon Fighting because the best weapon for this build to absorb damage is two-handed. And honestly, armor class doesn't matter that much when you're taking 0 damage anyways. As far as stats, strength is your most important one. After all, we wanna hit hard even while tanking and absorbing damage. But you can easily start with 16 because you'll be getting more from a feat later on, a very important one by the way. Later in the game, however, I would respect to start with 17 strength, so you can end up at 22, but this is very late only. Then 12 wisdom, because most of the enemy's crowd control effects will target your wisdom saving throws, so it helps you have a decent amount. Even easier if you are already a gnome with advantage on the saves. For the last 2 stats, well, you can either go with 14 dexterity and 16 constitution or the opposite. Hit points are nice, but like I said, you're mostly taking 0 damage anyways, so it's not like it matters that much. At most, you'll take a very small amount of non-physical damage like elemental, but you can easily handle that even with 14 constitution. I'd rather 16 dexterity because initiative is amazing, and this build has many bonuses from acting first, because to achieve the maximum damage reduction possible, we need to attack the enemy first, as each hit with our most powerful weapon will generate more and more DR. Of course, as early as Act 1 you have a pair of gloves that sets your dexterity to 18, and later during the 3rd act an amulet for 23 constitution. And yes, when you find these pieces of gear, you can just respec your character out of these stats if you want. For skills, definitely athletics and acrobatics, because we don't want to be pushed away or sleep on grease and other annoying ground effects. and the rest is up to you. So simply pick a background that will further complement the other skills you want. And from the second level onwards, I'll be continuing progression as a human as always, just to show you any race is viable. Feel free to go with whatever you want. You can now continue progression as a fighter, or if you were a paladin you would have access to smites. Or something else you can do, because this build can be quite powerful when it comes to soloing, is grab a multiclass into cleric and the classic light cleric for the warding flare ability, which can help very early in the game at least, when you won't have maximum damage reduction. Most importantly, this is also the main way of acquiring the easiest damage resistance source early, Blade Ward. And of course, if you were soloing, you would want this as a self-reliable ability. You can also delay it for the third level, so that you continue full progression into cleric and have access to the paladin smites. For me, however, I'll be keeping this character as a pure fighter, because there are many other ways of acquiring Blade Ward and 50% physical damage resistance if you're playing with other party members, especially a cleric like Shadowheart. Plus, having Action Surge right at level 2 is amazing, even better when we get our second attack at level 5. At level 3 fighter we get to pick our subclass. Well, you can certainly go with Champion for higher critical range, but since this character will be going all out into fighter, I'd rather Battle Master at last, because I find it has better bonuses, well, the more fighter levels you get. Champion is more for just that classic level 3 multiclassing and then go into something else. Of course, we get to pick our battle maneuvers. There's plenty of nice ones, but for this build, definitely riposte, so that whenever enemies miss you, you'll get to retaliate and strike back. And yes, even if you can absorb most damage, you'll still have decent armor class by virtue of equipping heavy armor. Second, precision attack. It can help quite a lot early on by increasing your attack rolls when you are at your weakest, especially to make up for the Great Weapon Master penalty later on. The last one is up to you. Evasive footwork, for example, can be quite powerful by forcing all enemy attacks to come at you with disadvantage. It's just that very soon at around level 4, you'll have a very nice way of, increasing your damage reduction to the max. And it only gets better and better from there on. So it's not like this will be that useful starting from around level 5 or 6 plus. But well, you can always respec out of it later anyways. Besides that, pushing attack, just to push enemies into more advantageous positions, or into the void for instant kills. Sweeping attack can hit multiple enemies at once, but the damage is awful, especially when compared to the normal two-handed weapon cleave ability or the Tiger Barbarian cleave. And well, menacing attack can deal higher damage and frighten the enemy. The same for trip attack with knockdown, or disarming attack. To put it simply, precision attack, riposte, and the other one is up to you. At level 4 we get our first feat, and this is extremely important. For once, we'll be going with Heavy Armor Master. First, it enhances our strength by +1, which is why I started with 16. But most importantly, here's the best part. Incoming damage from non-magical attacks will be decreased by 3 entire points when you're wearing heavy armor. And honestly, 95% if not more enemies in this game do not have magical attacks, including even on Tactician mode. The best part of course is, as I explained before, damage reduction will stack with other sources and also resistance. This alone can really help you early. At level 5 we get our second extra attack, which is amazing especially when combined with the fighter Action Surge and the Haste spell, plus the Elixir of Bloodlust as well. So just at this level, you are already drowning the enemies in attacks. It's not just about tanking and absorbing hits. And yes, I would rather keep our character a pure fighter from now onwards, for more attacks and more nice goodies too, including the extra feat only fighters get at level 6. You can already pick Great Weapon Master to highly increase your damage, as the best weapon we have is two-handed for this type of build, or the Alert feat to highly increase your initiative. As I said before, initiative is very important, especially for this character, as you not have to rely on the RNG initiative rolls. The only difference is the other feat you'll pick at level 8. At level 7, we get 2 more battle maneuvers, and like I said, you can pick anything you want, including, let's say, something like trip attack and pushing attack. And for level 8, pick whatever feat is remaining, so For us, Alert, or Great Weapon Master if you didn't pick it before. At level 9 you have the Indomitable feature, which can help quite a lot when it comes to avoiding enemy crowd control effects and other debuffs and so on, by re-rolling the die whenever you fail. We have even more maneuvers at level 10, plus an increase in the value of your superiority dice. And once again, any other maneuvers you want. And at level 11, fighters are the only class that get yet another extra attack, which is amazing when combined with multiple actions. And well, you might as well keep your character a pure fighter until level 12 for the extra feat, which should go into ability improvement and strength. Of course, at this point you can just use the gloves of strength, but I don't find them necessary at all, because you would already be at 20, 22 even with a certain potion from Act 2, and the gloves set you to 23, it's not that much of a difference. Now let us cover gear for our Immortal, 0 damage taken tank. For the helmet, as always, Seravox is the best choice later during Act 3 for higher critical range. Because of how many attacks this character has by virtue of being a fighter, when you combine this with advantage, you'll be getting loads and loads of criticals. For the first act, however, you have other options, such as the classic haste helm to help you with movement speed, especially if you went with the gnome race that has less movement. And for the second act, you can go with the Dark Justiciar helmet or the Covert cowl for more critical range. I know it's the same as a lot of my other builds, but what can I say? If you are a melee character or ranged even, you want higher criticals. For cloaks, there's actually nothing that important for this build. I have the Cinder Moth cloak here to inflict burning on enemies that attack you, but honestly you might as well go with the Flash Melter cloak instead to retaliate with minor acid damage whenever enemies hit you with a melee attack, which of course will deal 0 damage. For armor, when it comes to Act 3, the ultimate choice is definitely the Hell Dusk, because it not only has the highest AC value, but also reduces the damage taken from all sources by 3. No other armor in the game has as high damage reduction. But if you prefer, you can also go with the Armor of Persistence. It has 2 points worth of damage reduction and a very nice extra benefit: permanent Blade Ward and also the resistance cantrip for bonus to saving throws. It's just that, you know, you can always have someone cast Warding Bond on you, which provides full physical and elemental and everything resistance anyways. And by the way, if the character with Warding Bonds that would take damage, like my Shadowheart here whenever your tank gets hit, also has a source of damage reduction, they'll at most only take 1 point of damage while you'll take 0, which is very powerful. Both of these armors are Act 3, but when it comes to Act 1, don't be afraid, we still have another amazing armor choice: the Adamantine Splint Armor, which not only makes you immune to critical hits, but also reduces melee damage by 2. When you combine this with physical resistance and the Heavy Armor Master feat, even as early as what, level 5, you can already have your entire full damage absorption combo going, which is why I said this build gets good even early. For gloves, Hell Dusk is great as always for extra damage on hit, but you can also go with Legacy of Masters for more saving throws and also more attack rolls and damage, or even the Martial Exertion gloves for yet another action. When you combine this with everything fighter has, you definitely have higher than 13 entire attacks. It's overkill, by the way, right? You don't really need it, but hey, you can do it if you want. Meanwhile, for the second act, you have Dark Justiciar gauntlets instead, also for extra damage. But for the first and even second act, if you prefer, the gloves of the Growling Underdog, of course, should generate advantage on all of your melee attacks. For boots, the Swiracy shoes can help. For acrobatics and higher jumping distance, we do jump very far because of our high strength. The classic Disintegrating Nightwalkers for teleportation, and even the Hell Dusk boots later on. For amulets, I'd say you have 2 options that stand out: greater health during Act 3 if you want the highest hit points possible, or just the classic Broodmother's Revenge as early as Act 1 for higher damage on hit. Or even something like the Amulet of Misty Step, Amulet of the Harpers, Face Semblance for advantage on all mental ability scores, just like a gnome, except it will cost you an equipment slot. and of course the Surge and Subjugation for a free critical hit. As far as rings, the classic Caustic Band for extra damage, found as early as Act 1, and I really enjoy the Risky Ring for this type of character as well, because we don't have that many sources of advantage, but of course, there's always the Gloves of the Growling Underdog earlier. Otherwise, just a classic Callous Glow Ring for higher damage on hit. And even Crusher's Ring very early for higher movement. Now let's get into weapons and consumables. And honestly, there is only a single weapon that you want for the whole game because of how good it is for this type of build. The Skinbuster Halberd, because of its unique Skinbuster Force ability. Whenever you deal melee damage to an enemy, you'll get 2 whole turns of Force Conduit. Each remaining turn provides you with an extra point of damage reduction against all physical sources, which of course stacks with everything else, including the bonus from your armor and your heavy armor feat. This is why it's so easy to make any enemy in the game, even on Tactician, deal only 0 damage to our character. And you can get it as early as Act 1 at the Githyanki Crash area, which is also why you don't need anything else on the second or third acts. As far as ranged weapons, Deadshot as always for the highest critical range, but earlier, Darkfire is quite powerful for Act 2 because of its, well, haste effect, especially if soloing, and most importantly resistance against fire and cold, which helps if you don't want to rely on Warding Bond. You can always get physical from just Blade Ward, and now you have the most important element, fire, from your bow. But for very early, even during Act 1, I've grown rather fond of the Bow of Awareness just to increase your initiative further when you need it the most. Like I said, you do have to attack the enemy first with Skinbuster to get more damage reduction, so it helps acting first. As far as consumables, well, while you can rely on the Elixir of Universal Resistance, for of course the same effect as the Warding Bond spell with no downside, it sadly only lasts for 10 turns, which is rather disappointing as opposed to much better elixirs, like the classic Bloodlust for yet another action and temporary hit points on kill, which helps you avoid the very minor elemental damage you would take otherwise, especially if you don't go with Warding Bond. Plus of course, it's until long rest instead of just 10 turns. But by the way, you can actually go with both of them at the same time, amusingly enough. And well, this was it from my ultimate 100% damage absorption tank build. If you found this guide useful, please remember to like and subscribe, and also consider becoming a channel member if you can. I'd really appreciate your support. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends, with more BG3 content.